Mastering the Psychology of Human Behavior. The Hidden Rules of the Mind. What if I told you that everything you think you know about human behavior is completely wrong? What if the people around you, your colleagues, friends, even family members, are acting according to hidden psychological laws they're not even aware of? Here's the truth most people will never discover. Humans are not logical beings. We like to think we are. We tell ourselves we make rational decisions based on evidence and data. But neuroscience has revealed something shocking. The human brain makes the decision first, then generates logical justifications to make us feel intelligent. This means we create post hoc rationalizations for choices we've already made subconsciously. So every day, you're surrounded by people controlled by invisible psychological forces. And if you don't understand these forces, you're being controlled by them too. You're reacting, not responding. You're being influenced, not influencing. You're playing a game where everyone knows the rules, except you. But what if you could reverse the script? What if you could see the psychological patterns governing human behavior before others even notice? What if you could predict what people will do, understand why they do it, and influence their decisions in ways that feel completely natural to them? The world's most successful leaders, negotiators, entrepreneurs, and influential people understand human psychology at an almost supernatural level. They possess extraordinary abilities to read, predict, and direct human behavior. They are strategic. They see a game that others aren't even aware they're playing. This audio recording will give you the same advantage. When you finish listening, you'll never look at human interactions the same way again. You'll see the psychological triggers most people miss. You'll understand the subconscious patterns driving every decision, and you'll have the tools to ethically influence any situation in your favor. But you need to understand this. This knowledge isn't for everyone. Most people prefer to remain unconscious, letting their emotions and impulses guide their behavior. They're comfortable being predictable, being influenced, being managed. If you're ready to transition to a higher level of awareness, ready to understand the hidden psychology controlling human behavior, then let's begin. Because once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Logical Behavior. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we are rational beings, making logical decisions. This lie is so deeply embedded in our self-perception that we aggressively defend it even when presented with overwhelming evidence to the contrary. But here's what neuroscientists have discovered that will shatter this illusion forever. Using brain imaging technology, researchers can see exactly how decisions are made in the human brain. And what they've found is revolutionary. Your brain's emotional centers, specifically the limbic system, make decisions a full 5 seconds before your conscious mind realizes a decision needs to be made. 5 seconds. This means the part of you that thinks it's in control, your rational, conscious mind, is actually just along for the ride. It's creating stories to justify decisions that have already been made by your unconscious, emotional brain. Think about the last big decision you made. Maybe a career choice, selecting a romantic partner, or deciding where to live. You probably told yourself that you weighed the pros and cons, logically analyzed the options, and made a smart choice. But here's the truth. Your emotional brain made that decision instantly, based on subconscious psychological triggers you didn't recognize. Your rational mind simply created a convincing story afterward to make you feel intelligent about a choice you'd already made. This is why people make decisions that seem completely illogical from the outside. They're not actually being illogical. They're being perfectly logical within the framework of their subconscious psychological programming. Every human operates according to 3 hidden psychological systems that most never become aware of. First system, the survival brain. This is the most primitive part of your psychological structure, and its sole job is to keep you alive and safe. It doesn't care about logic, success, or long-term goals. It only cares about immediate threats and opportunities. When someone becomes defensive when receiving feedback, resists change even when it would benefit them, chooses comfort over growth, they're being controlled by their survival brain. This system operates completely below conscious awareness, yet it drives more human behavior than any other psychological force. Second system, the social brain. Humans evolved as tribal creatures, and our survival depended on our ability to fit into the group. Your social brain constantly scans for social threats, opportunities to increase your status, and ways to ensure belonging within your tribe. When people conform to group opinion, even when they know it's wrong, buy status symbols they can't afford, stay in toxic relationships or jobs because leaving would mean social rejection, they're being controlled by their social brain. This system is why peer pressure works just as effectively on adults as it does on teenagers. Third system, the meaning-making brain. Humans cannot tolerate uncertainty or randomness. We must create stories that explain everything that happens to us, even if those stories are completely false. Your meaning-making brain constantly interprets reality through the lens of your existing beliefs, filters out information that contradicts what you think you already know, and creates narratives that make you feel like you understand what's happening. This is why 2 people can witness the exact same event and walk away with completely different interpretations of what occurred. Here's the critical insight. These 3 systems operate automatically and unconsciously. Most people aren't even aware they're being controlled by them. They think their thoughts are their own, their decisions are rational, and their reactions are justified. But they're wrong. They're biological machines running ancient psychological programming designed for a world that no longer exists. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop taking people's reactions personally because you realize they're not actually reacting to you, they're reacting to subconscious psychological triggers you accidentally activated. You stop being confused by seemingly illogical behavior because you can see the hidden logic behind every human action. And most importantly, you stop being controlled by your own subconscious programming because awareness is the first step toward freedom. People who truly understand human psychology know that behavior isn't driven by logic. Behavior is driven by emotion, and we use logic to justify our emotional decisions after the fact. This is why facts don't change minds. This is why people don't do what's clearly in their own interest. And this is why the world's most influential people focus on emotional triggers, not logical arguments. Chapter 2. The 6 invisible forces controlling every human decision. While people believe they make decisions based on careful analysis and rational thinking, the truth is that every human decision is controlled by 6 invisible psychological forces. These forces operate below the level of consciousness, yet they determine everything from which products people buy, to whom they vote for, to whom they fall in love with. Master these 6 forces, and you'll have more influence over human behavior than you ever thought possible. First invisible force, social proof. This is the most powerful human behavior influencer that exists. People are biologically programmed to look to others for what to think and how to behave. When we're uncertain about what to do, we automatically scan our environment to see what other people are doing, then copy their behavior. This happens so unconsciously that most people aren't even aware it's occurring. Social proof explains why restaurants create fake lines in front of their establishments, why marketers use testimonials and reviews, and why laugh tracks make comedy shows seem funnier. When people see others engaging in a behavior, their brain interprets this as evidence that the behavior is correct, safe, and socially acceptable. The more people engaging in the behavior, the more powerful the social proof becomes. But here's what most people don't understand. Social proof doesn't require real people. It can be manufactured through stories, statistics, and testimonials. When you tell someone that thousands of people have already made the same decision you're asking them to make, you're activating the social proof instinct. Their brain stops asking whether the decision is logical and starts asking whether they want to be part of the group or outside of it. Fourth invisible force, consistency. And it locks people into behavioral patterns that can last for years or even decades. People have a deep psychological need to be consistent with their previous decisions, statements, and self-perception. When someone takes a position or makes a commitment, especially if it's public or written, their brain works overtime to maintain consistency with that position, even when new evidence shows they should change direction. Consistency explains why people stay in bad jobs, continue dysfunctional relationships, and keep voting for politicians who repeatedly disappoint them. It's not that they enjoy suffering. It's that changing direction would require them to admit they were wrong in a way that threatens their self-perception and creates cognitive dissonance. Fifth invisible force, scarcity. And it triggers the fear of loss, which motivates human behavior more than the desire for gain. When something is perceived as rare, limited, or about to become unavailable, its value instantly increases. This happens because your survival brain interprets scarcity as a threat and activates fight-or-flight responses that completely bypass rational thinking. Scarcity explains why limited-time offers work, why people fight over the last product on the shelf, and why exclusive access to anything instantly makes it more desirable. Sixth invisible force, likability. And it determines whether people want to be influenced by you in the first place. People prefer to say yes to those they like, trust, and feel connected to. This seems obvious, but what's not obvious is that likability and lovability can be systematically increased by understanding the psychological factors that create affinity between people. People like others who are similar to them, who give them genuine compliments, and who work toward common goals. They also like people who are attractive, confident, and associated with positive experiences. Understanding these 6 forces provides a completely different lens for viewing human behavior. Every decision, every reaction,
Every seemingly illogical choice can be understood as the result of one or more of these invisible forces activating in someone's subconscious mind.
Chapter 3. Reading the Hidden Language of Human Behavior. While people focus on what someone says, real communication happens through a hidden language that most people never learn to read. This hidden language consists of microexpressions, body positioning, vocal tonality, and subconscious behavioral patterns that reveal what someone is truly thinking and feeling, independent of what they're saying with words. The human face contains more than 40 muscle groups that create thousands of possible expressions, and most of these occur at a speed that barely registers in conscious awareness. These micro-expressions last fractions of a second, but they reveal the true emotional state behind what someone is trying to show. Learning to read micro-expressions gives you the ability to see deception, understand hidden emotions, and predict how someone will behave before they know themselves. The 7 universal micro-expressions are happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, surprise, and contempt. These expressions are the same across all cultures and automatically appear when someone experiences the corresponding emotion, even if they're trying to hide it. A flash of contempt lasting 1/10 of a second tells you more about someone's true opinion than 10 minutes of polite conversation. When someone's words don't match their micro-expressions, believe the micro-expressions. The conscious mind can control words, but it cannot control the automatic facial reactions that leak true emotions. But micro-expressions are just the beginning. The human body constantly broadcasts information about internal psychological states through posture, gestures, movement, and spatial positioning. These signals operate completely below conscious awareness, yet they reveal everything from confidence levels to deception, from romantic interest to hidden aggression. When someone is confident, their body naturally expands. They take up more space, their shoulders broaden, their posture straightens, and their movements become more purposeful. When someone experiences a lack of confidence, their body contracts. They cross their arms, hunch their shoulders, touch their face or neck, and minimize their physical presence. Deception creates specific body language patterns that the body finds nearly impossible to suppress. When someone is lying, their body naturally wants to create distance from the deception. They lean back, create barriers with their arms or objects, reduce eye contact, and increase self-soothing behaviors, like touching their face or playing with their hair. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Influence and Persuasion. Most people think influence is about having good arguments, being persistent, or having authority over others. They're completely wrong. Real influence operates at the psychological level, where decisions are actually made, not at the logical level, where decisions appear to be made. Understanding the psychology of influence means understanding how to align your requests with the subconscious decision-making patterns that actually control human behavior. The foundation of all influence is trust. But trust isn't what most people think it is. Trust isn't about being trustworthy in the moral sense, though that's certainly important. Trust is about being predictable in ways that make someone's brain feel safe. When someone's subconscious mind perceives you as predictable, non-threatening, and aligned with their interests, their psychological defenses drop and they become open to your influence.
Trust is built through three specific mechanisms that operate below conscious awareness. First mechanism, similarity. People trust others who are like them because similar people are perceived as having similar interests and motivations. When you mirror someone's communication style, match their energy level, and reflect their values back to them, you're activating similarity trust triggers. Second mechanism, consistency. People trust others whose behavior is predictable and reliable. When you do what you say you'll do, show up consistently, and your behavior aligns with your stated values, you're demonstrating the type of predictability that causes someone's brain to classify you as safe and trustworthy. Third mechanism, competence. People trust others who demonstrate the ability to deliver results in areas that matter to them. When you display expertise, share valuable insights, or solve problems effectively, you're building competence-based trust that transfers to other areas of the interaction. Once trust is established, influence becomes a matter of psychological positioning. The most powerful influence technique is reframing, changing how someone thinks about a situation without changing the facts of the situation. Every situation can be interpreted in multiple ways, and whichever interpretation dominates someone's thinking determines their emotional response and behavioral choices. When you want someone to take action, you reframe the situation as opportunity rather than risk. When you want someone to change their mind, you reframe the new information as consistent with rather than contradictory to their existing beliefs.
Chapter 5. Advanced Behavior Prediction. The ultimate goal of understanding human psychology isn't just to read what someone is thinking and feeling right now, but to predict what they will think, feel, and do in the future. Behavior prediction appears like magic, but it's actually a systematic process based on understanding how different personality types respond to different situations. Every human operates according to subconscious psychological patterns that remain consistent across different contexts and time periods. These patterns form early in life and become deeply embedded in the neural pathways that control decision-making, emotional responses, and behavioral choices. When you understand someone's core psychological patterns, their future behavior becomes highly predictable. The first step in behavior prediction is identifying someone's primary psychological drivers. Everyone is motivated by a combination of fundamental human needs, including security, significance, variety, connection, growth, and contribution. However, each person has a unique hierarchy of needs that determines their priorities, fears, and decision-making criteria. Someone whose primary driver is security will consistently choose options that minimize risk, maintain stability, and protect what they already have. They will be resistant to change even when it would benefit them. Someone whose primary driver is significance will consistently choose options that increase their status, recognition, and sense of importance. They will take risks if those risks come with potential increased recognition. Chapter 6. The Psychology of Emotional Control. Most people believe emotions are things that happen to them, random psychological events they must endure or fight against. This belief traps them in reactive patterns that sabotage their success, relationships, and decision-making ability. But what neuroscience has revealed is this: emotions are not random events. They are predictable psychological responses that can be understood, controlled, and used strategically to achieve your goals. The first thing you need to understand
is that emotions are created not by events themselves, but by your subconscious interpretation of them. Two people can experience the exact same situation and have completely different emotional responses because their brains are interpreting the situation differently. This means emotional control isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about changing the subconscious interpretations that create the emotions in the first place. Your brain operates according to what neuroscientists call predictive processing. This means your brain is constantly trying to predict what will happen next based on past experiences and current information. When reality matches your brain's predictions, you feel calm and in control. When reality violates your brain's predictions, you experience negative emotions like anxiety, anger, or disappointment. The key to emotional control is learning to update your brain's prediction models in real time. When you feel a negative emotion arising, instead of getting swept up in it, you ask yourself what prediction your brain made that doesn't match reality. Then you consciously update that prediction with more accurate information. This process rewires your neural pathways and changes your automatic emotional responses to similar situations in the future. The second principle of emotional control is understanding that emotions have specific physiological signatures that can be interrupted before they take control of your behavior. Each emotion creates a series of chemical and physical changes in your body. Anger increases your heart rate, clenches your jaw, and floods your system with stress hormones. Fear creates shallow breathing, muscle tension, and heightened alertness. Anxiety produces restlessness, digestive changes, and scattered attention. When you learn to recognize these physiological signatures early, you can interrupt the emotional cascade before it drowns out your rational thinking. The most effective technique is controlled breathing, which directly affects your autonomic nervous system and resets your emotional state. When you feel an unwanted emotion beginning, immediately shift to slow, deep breathing with exhalations longer than inhalations. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system and prevents the emotion from escalating into reactive behavior. The third principle is strategic emotional positioning. Rather than trying to eliminate negative emotions entirely, you learn to position yourself emotionally in ways that serve your goals. Different emotional states create different cognitive abilities, and the most psychologically sophisticated people deliberately cultivate emotional states that enhance their performance in specific situations. When you need to be creative or innovative, you cultivate positive emotions like curiosity and excitement because these states expand your thinking and increase your ability to see new connections and possibilities. When you need to analyze complex problems or make careful decisions, you cultivate neutral emotions like calm focus, because these states narrow your attention and increase your analytical precision. When you need to negotiate or influence others, you cultivate confident emotions like controlled intensity, because these states project authority and increase the likelihood that others will defer to your judgment. The fourth principle is emotional contagion mastery. Human emotions are highly contagious due to mirror neurons in your brain that automatically mimic the emotional states of people around you. Most people are completely unconscious of this process, which means they're constantly absorbing other people's emotions and confusing those emotions with their own genuine feelings. When you master emotional contagion, you reverse this dynamic completely. Instead of absorbing other people's emotions, you become the emotional leader in every interaction. You consciously project the emotional state you want others to experience, and their mirror neurons automatically synchronize to your emotional frequency. The most advanced level of emotional control is what might be called emotional aikido. Rather than fighting against difficult emotions or trying to suppress them, you learn to redirect their energy toward productive outcomes. Anger can be redirected into focused determination. Anxiety can be redirected into careful preparation. Frustration can be redirected into creative. They are sources of energy and information that can be channeled in constructive or destructive directions. Chapter 7. Mental Manipulation Defense Systems. Every day, you are the target of sophisticated psychological manipulation attempts designed to control your behavior and shape your decisions to serve others' interests, not yours. Most of these manipulation attempts succeed because people don't recognize them as manipulation. They appear as normal social interaction, helpful advice, or reasonable requests. The first step in defending against manipulation is understanding that manipulation isn't always malicious or conscious. Many people unconsciously manipulate others because they've learned that certain psychological tactics help them get what they want. They may not be aware they're being manipulative, but the effect on you is the same, regardless of their intent. However, conscious manipulators are an entirely different category. These are people who deliberately study psychological vulnerabilities and systematically exploit them. They include narcissistic individuals who manipulate for control, salespeople who manipulate for profit, and sociopathic personalities who manipulate for entertainment. The foundation of all manipulation is creating artificial urgency or scarcity that bypasses your rational decision-making process. Manipulators know that when you feel pressure to make quick decisions, you're more likely to rely on emotional impulses rather than careful analysis. They create time pressure through phrases like, "This offer ends tonight," "I need an answer immediately," or "You'll miss this opportunity if you don't act now." The defense against artificial urgency is the 48-hour rule. When someone pressures you to make a sudden decision, especially one involving money, commitments, or significant changes in your life, you automatically implement a 48-hour waiting period. You tell them you need time to evaluate their offer and refuse to engage with pressure tactics designed to override this boundary. Real opportunities don't disappear because you take time to think about them. Manipulative opportunities are designed to evaporate under scrutiny, which is why manipulators always create artificial time pressure. The second major manipulation technique is emotional guilt and obligation. Manipulators make you feel like you owe them something, that you're selfish or ungrateful if you don't comply with their requests, or that you're responsible for their emotional well-being. They use phrases like, "After everything I've done for you, I thought you cared about me," or "You're selfish." The defense against guilt manipulation is understanding that you are never responsible for other people's emotions, choices, or consequences. You can be thoughtful and caring while setting boundaries that serve your own interests without sacrificing yourself. When someone tries to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries or making choices that serve your interests, it's a red flag that they're attempting to manipulate you. Chapter 8. The Architecture of Persuasive Communication. Most people believe persuasive communication is about having better arguments, speaking more confidently, or being more persistent. They focus on what they say, while completely ignoring how their message is received and processed by the other person's brain. Real persuasive communication isn't about what you say, It's about aligning your message with how the human brain processes information and makes decisions. The human brain processes information in a specific sequence that most people never learn. Understanding this sequence allows you to structure your communication in ways that dramatically increase your persuasive effectiveness. The brain first determines whether you are friend or foe, then decides if your message is relevant to immediate survival needs, then evaluates whether your information matches existing beliefs, and finally, assesses the logical content of your message. This means logic and rational arguments are actually the least important part of persuasive communication, even though most people spend all their time focusing on logical arguments. If someone's brain has classified you as a threat, decided your message isn't relevant to their immediate concerns, or determined your information contradicts their existing beliefs, they will never reach the point where they objectively evaluate your logical arguments. The first element of persuasive architecture is building psychological safety. Before anyone can be open to your influence, their brain must determine that you are not a threat to their status, security, or identity. This happens through subtle communication signals, including matching their communication style, acknowledging their perspective before presenting yours, and demonstrating that you understand their concerns and interests. Psychological safety is destroyed by communication patterns that trigger threat responses: interrupting, contradicting without acknowledgement, speaking in ways that suggest superiority, or presenting information that directly challenges their identity or competence. The second element is establishing relevance. Before someone will invest the attention required to understand what you're trying to communicate, you must connect your message to something they already care about. This requires understanding their existing priorities, concerns, and interests, then positioning your message as relevant to these existing motivations. Relevance cannot be assumed or imposed. It must be explicitly established through language that connects your message to their recognized goals, problems, or desires. The third element is building belief bridges. Rather than directly challenging someone's existing beliefs, you build bridges between their current beliefs and the new information you want them to accept. Direct belief challenges activate confirmation bias and make people more resistant to your message. Belief bridges make new information feel like a natural extension of what someone already thinks, rather than a contradiction of their existing worldview. The fourth element is creating emotional resonance. Information that connects to someone's emotions is processed more deeply and remembered more clearly than information that remains purely logical. The most powerful persuasive communication doesn't connect to positive emotions like happiness and excitement, but to identity-related emotions like pride, fear of loss, desire for significance, and need for security. When your message connects to these deeper emotional drivers, it becomes personally important rather than merely intellectually interesting. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Chapter 9. Advanced Social Dynamics and Power Psychology. People exist within invisible hierarchies that determine everything from who speaks first in meetings to whose ideas are taken seriously, who gets promoted, and who gets ignored. Most people are completely unaware of these hierarchical dynamics, which means they unconsciously accept whatever position is assigned to them by others. Understanding power psychology allows you to recognize these invisible hierarchies and strategically position yourself within them. Power in social interactions is not primarily about formal authority, wealth, or credentials, though these can be factors. Real power comes from psychological positioning that causes others to instinctively defer to your judgment. This psychological positioning is created through specific communication patterns, behavioral choices, and social strategies that operate below the level of conscious awareness. The foundation of social power is what researchers call frame control. Every social interaction occurs within a psychological frame that determines how the interaction is interpreted and what behaviors are considered appropriate. The person who controls the frame controls the interaction. Most people unconsciously accept whatever frame is established by others. However, strategic thinkers learn to establish and maintain their own frames. Frame control is established through several mechanisms. The first is reality definition. You state with sufficient confidence what is happening, what it means, and what should happen next, so that others accept your interpretation as objective reality. When someone challenges your frame, you don't argue with their alternative interpretation. You restate your frame as if the challenge never occurred. The second mechanism is emotional tone setting. The person who establishes the emotional tone of an interaction typically controls the direction and outcome of that interaction. If you remain calm and centered while others become reactive, you become the stable point around which the interaction revolves. The third mechanism is agenda control. You control the frame by determining what topics are discussed, in what order they're addressed, and how much time is spent on each topic. The second important aspect of power psychology is status signaling. People constantly broadcast and read status signals that determine their position in social hierarchies. These signals are largely unconscious, but extremely powerful in shaping how others respond to you. High-status behaviors include speaking at a measured pace with strategic pauses, maintaining relaxed but attentive posture, taking up appropriate space, making direct eye contact without staring, and responding to questions thoughtfully rather than rushing. Low-status behaviors include speaking rapidly or hesitantly, fidgeting or self-soothing gestures, contracting body posture, avoiding eye contact, and immediately responding to every question or comment. The key insight is that status is largely performative. People assign you whatever status you consistently demonstrate through your behavioral patterns. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.
Chapter 10. The Psychology of Decision-Making Under Pressure. When people are under pressure, their decision-making processes change dramatically in ways most people don't understand. Stress and high stakes activate different parts of the brain and create predictable decision-making patterns that can either enhance or sabotage performance if you don't understand how to work with these patterns. The first thing that happens is your brain shifts from deliberate thinking to automatic thinking. Under normal conditions, you have access to your full analytical capabilities, can carefully weigh options, evaluate long-term consequences, and make decisions based on complex reasoning. Under pressure, your brain switches to rapid pattern recognition and emotional decision-making that prioritizes speed over accuracy. This shift occurs because your survival brain interprets pressure as potential threat. From an evolutionary perspective, taking time to carefully analyze a potential predator gets you killed. Therefore, your brain automatically switches to fight or flight decision-making that prioritizes immediate response over optimal outcomes.
Understanding this shift allows you to prepare for pressure situations by preloading your automatic thinking with high-quality decision patterns. This means identifying the types of pressure situations you're likely to encounter, predetermining optimal responses to these situations, and rehearsing these responses until they become automatic. The second major change under pressure is that your attention dramatically narrows. Under normal conditions, you can maintain awareness of multiple factors, evaluate various perspectives, and track subtle but important details. Under pressure, your attention laser focuses on what your brain perceives as the most urgent threat or opportunity, and you become blind to everything else. This attention narrowing can be beneficial when you need to focus intensely on a specific task, but it becomes problematic when optimal decisions require evaluating multiple factors simultaneously. The key is learning to artificially broaden your attention during pressure situations by using systematic checklists and decision frameworks. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.
Chapter 11. Advanced Pattern Recognition in Human Behavior. The highest level of psychological mastery is developing the ability to recognize behavioral patterns before they fully emerge, allowing you to predict and respond to human behavior with almost supernatural accuracy. Most people react to what has already happened, but pattern recognition masters see what will happen and position themselves accordingly. This ability transforms you from someone who reacts to human behavior into someone who anticipates and directs it. Human behavior operates according to predictable patterns that repeat across different people. These patterns exist because all humans share the same basic psychological structure, face similar fundamental challenges, and respond to universal psychological triggers. When you understand these universal patterns, individual behavior becomes highly predictable. The first category of behavioral patterns is what might be called stress response signatures. Every person has a unique but consistent way of responding when they feel threatened, overwhelmed, or under pressure. Some people respond to stress by becoming more aggressive and controlling. Others respond to stress by becoming more collaborative and consensus-seeking. They slow down decision-making, involve more people in the process, and focus on maintaining relationships even while addressing problems. Some people respond to stress by withdrawing and becoming analytical. They gather more information, delay decisions until they feel more certain, and prefer to solve problems independently. Others respond to stress by becoming more expressive and outgoing. They talk through problems out loud, seek support from others, and make decisions based on gut feeling rather than careful analysis. These stress response patterns are incredibly useful for behavior prediction because stress situations reveal authentic personality traits that people typically mask during normal conditions. When you know how someone responds to pressure, you can predict not only their behavior in crisis situations, but also the underlying psychological structure that influences their behavior during normal circumstances. The second step is understanding someone's cognitive biases and decision-making shortcuts. Everyone uses mental shortcuts called heuristics to process information quickly and make decisions. These shortcuts are often helpful, but create predictable patterns of error and bias that can be predicted once you understand them. Some people have a strong confirmation bias, meaning they seek out information that confirms what they already believe and ignore information that contradicts their existing views.
When you identify this pattern, you can predict they will be resistant to new ideas that challenge their worldview. They will interpret ambiguous information in ways that support their existing beliefs and surround themselves with people who share their views. Some people have a strong availability bias, meaning they give excessive weight to information that's easily recalled and less weight to information that's more abstract or statistical. When you identify this pattern, you can predict they will be strongly influenced by recent events, personal experiences, and vivid stories, not statistical evidence or logical arguments. The third step is understanding someone's values hierarchy. Everyone has a subconscious ranking of what matters most to them, whether that's family, achievement, creativity, justice, security, or freedom. These value hierarchies determine how people make trade-offs when different options serve different values. Someone who values achievement over security will consistently choose challenging opportunities over comfortable situations, even when challenging opportunities involve significant risk. Someone who values family over career advancement will consistently choose options that preserve family relationships over options that increase professional success, even when professional opportunities are objectively superior. Understanding someone's values hierarchy allows you to predict their behavior in complex situations where multiple factors compete for their attention. You can anticipate which factors they will prioritize, what trade-offs they'll be willing to make, and which outcomes they'll find most satisfying. The final step is understanding someone's subconscious relationship patterns. Everyone has typical ways of relating to authority figures, peers, subordinates, and strangers that remain consistent across different relationships and contexts. These patterns are often invisible to the person displaying them, but clearly visible to outside observers who know what to look for. Some people unconsciously seek approval from authority figures, meaning they will modify their behavior to please bosses, experts, and other high-status individuals. Some people unconsciously resist authority, meaning they will question directives, challenge conventional wisdom, and prefer to make their own decisions independent of external guidance. When you combine understanding of psychological drivers, stress responses, cognitive biases, values hierarchies, and relationship patterns, you develop an incredibly accurate model for how someone will behave in virtually any situation. This predictive ability gives you enormous advantages in negotiations, leadership, sales, relationships, and every other context where understanding and influencing human behavior matters. Chapter 12. Long-term behavior change and habit psychology. Most people approach behavior change through willpower and motivation, trying to force themselves to behave differently through conscious effort and determination. This approach fails more than 90% of the time because it fights against rather than works with the psychological systems that actually control behavior. Understanding habit psychology allows you to create lasting behavior change by aligning your conscious goals with your subconscious behavioral programming. The human brain is designed to automate frequently repeated behaviors in order to conserve mental energy for new or complex situations. These automated behaviors become habits that operate below conscious awareness and require little or no willpower to maintain. The key to lasting behavior change is not fighting against your brain's automation systems, but programming them with the behaviors you want. Every habit operates according to what neuroscientists call the habit loop, a cue that triggers the behavior, a routine, which is the behavior itself, and a reward that reinforces the neural pathway. Most people focus only on changing the routine, but lasting change requires understanding and modifying all three components of the habit loop. Cue identification and design is the first step in habit change. Habits are triggered by specific environmental, emotional, or social cues that signal to your brain it's time to engage in the automatic behavior. These cues can be external factors like specific locations, times of day, or social situations, or internal factors like emotional states, thoughts, or physical sensations. To change existing habits, you must identify the specific cues that trigger unwanted behaviors. Then, either eliminate those cues from your environment or create new behavioral routines that respond to the same cues. To create new habits, you must design clear, consistent cues that will trigger the behaviors you want. The most effective cues are those tied to existing routines or environmental factors that already occur regularly in your life, are specific, consistent, and connected. The second step is routine optimization and progression. The behaviors you're trying to establish should be designed for consistency rather than intensity, especially in the early stages of habit formation.
Most people try to implement dramatic changes that require high levels of motivation and willpower, which is unsustainable over time. Effective habit routines start extremely small and gradually increase in complexity or intensity as the behavior becomes more automatic. For example, if you want to develop an exercise habit, rather than committing to an hour-long workout routine, you might start with a commitment to put on workout clothes every day. Once putting on workout clothes becomes automatic, you can add walking around the block, then gradually build toward more intense exercise routines. The key principle is that consistency matters more than intensity during habit formation. Doing a small version of the behavior every day is better than doing an intense version inconsistently. The third step is reward system optimization. Habits are reinforced by rewards that strengthen the neural pathways that create positive associations with the behavior and make the behavior more automatic over time. These rewards can be intrinsic satisfaction from the behavior itself or external rewards that you consciously add to the behavior. The most sustainable habit rewards are intrinsic rewards that come from the behavior itself. For example, for regular exercise, the reward might be increased energy, improved mood, or the satisfaction of being someone who prioritizes their health. External rewards can be useful for establishing habits initially, but should gradually be replaced with intrinsic rewards to create self-sustaining habits rather than ones dependent on ongoing external motivation. The fourth step is identity alignment and reinforcement. The most powerful driver of long-term behavior change is identity change rather than behavior change. When you align your identity with the behaviors you want to maintain, these behaviors become expressions of who you are rather than things you have to force yourself to do. Identity-based habit change involves consciously adopting the identity of someone who naturally engages in the behaviors you want to develop. Instead of saying, "I want to exercise more," you say, "I'm someone who prioritizes physical fitness." Instead of, "I want to read more," you say, "I'm someone who values learning and personal development." Each time you engage in the desired behavior, you reinforce this identity by providing evidence that you really are someone who does these things. Over time, the identity becomes self-reinforcing as you naturally act in ways consistent with how you see yourself. The fifth step is environment design and systems thinking. Your environment has enormous influence on your behavior, often far more than your conscious intentions or willpower. Designing your environment to support desired behaviors and discourage unwanted behaviors is one of the most effective strategies for lasting change. Chapter 13. The Complete Psychological Mastery Framework. You now have a comprehensive understanding of human psychology that gives you enormous advantages in every area of life where human behavior matters. But without application, knowledge remains merely interesting information rather than practical power. This final chapter integrates everything you've learned into a complete framework for applying psychological mastery in real-world situations to achieve your most important goals. The foundation of psychological mastery is what might be called strategic awareness, operating from conscious understanding of the psychological dynamics occurring in every human interaction rather than simply reacting to surface-level behaviors and communications. Most people navigate social and professional situations according to instinct, emotion, and cultural conditioning. Strategic awareness involves automatically asking yourself several key questions during important interactions. What psychological state is the other person in right now? And how does this affect their decision-making capacity and receptivity to influence? What subconscious needs, fears, or motivations are driving their behavior beneath what they're explicitly communicating? What behavioral patterns are they displaying that predict how they'll respond to different approaches? You also maintain awareness of your own psychological state and see how it's affecting your thinking, emotional reactions, and behavioral choices. You consciously manage your emotional state to maintain resourcefulness and clarity, rather than being reactive to emotions arising from circumstances. You notice when your own cognitive biases, defensive reactions, or ego needs are interfering with your ability to respond strategically to situations. The second level of the framework is interaction design, consciously structuring conversations, meetings, and social encounters to create optimal conditions for achieving your goals. Rather than hoping interactions will naturally lead to positive outcomes, you take responsibility for directing interactions in directions that serve everyone's interests. Interaction design begins before the interaction starts. Understanding what you want to accomplish, what the other person's likely priorities and concerns are, and what approach is most likely to create mutual satisfaction with the outcome. During the interaction, you monitor psychological dynamics and adjust your approach based on real-time feedback about how your communication is being received. You notice when someone becomes defensive, disconnected, or resistant, and you shift your approach to re-establish psychological safety and openness. The third level is influence orchestration, systematically applying principles of persuasion and behavioral psychology to create outcomes that serve your goals while also providing genuine value to others. This is not manipulation, because it's based on creating mutual benefit rather than one-sided advantage. Influence orchestration involves understanding what someone's primary motivations and psychological drivers are, then framing your requests and offers in ways that align with these drivers. You provide value before asking for something in return, build trust through consistency and competence, and create social proof that supports the actions you're encouraging. You also understand timing and know when someone is psychologically ready to make a decision and when they need more time, information, or emotional processing. The fourth level is relationship architecture,
consciously building and maintaining relationships that provide mutual value over extended periods. Rather than focusing only on immediate transactions or interactions, you think strategically about how to create relationships that become more valuable to both parties over time. Relationship architecture involves understanding what different people need from relationships and consistently providing those things in sustainable ways. The fifth level is systematic influence, creating systems and processes that multiply your influence beyond what you could achieve through individual interactions. This includes building reputation and credibility that creates influence even with people you never directly meet. The final level is psychological leadership, inspiring others to voluntarily follow your guidance because they trust your judgment and believe following your leadership serves their interests. Psychological leadership is built through consistently demonstrating competence in areas that matter to others, making decisions that benefit the group rather than just yourself, and maintaining integrity between your stated values and your actual behavior. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.
Chapter 14. Building Mental Resilience and Inner Strength. Psychological resilience is not a fixed trait that you either have or don't have. It is a set of learnable skills that can be systematically developed to create unshakable mental strength, independent of external conditions. The foundation of psychological resilience is what neuroscientists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift between different mental frameworks and adapt your thinking to changing situations. Most people become psychologically stuck because they cling tightly to specific interpretations of events, particular outcomes they are trying to achieve, or fixed ideas about how things should work. Cognitive flexibility allows you to hold multiple perspectives at once, shift between different problem-solving approaches as circumstances change, and find opportunity within apparent setbacks. The first skill for developing cognitive flexibility is perspective scaling. This means intentionally switching between different time horizons and levels of analysis when evaluating challenges or setbacks. When something goes wrong, most people get swept up in immediate emotional reactions and lose sight of the broader context of their life and goals. Perspective scaling involves systematically asking yourself how the current situation will matter in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and 5 years. You also ask how this situation fits into the broader context of your life goals, personal growth, and overall life experience. The second skill is interpretation flexibility. Every situation can be interpreted in multiple ways, and the interpretation you choose shapes both your emotional response and your behavioral options. Resilient people automatically generate multiple interpretations for difficult situations and consciously choose the ones that preserve their psychological resources. The third skill is emotional regulation mastery. Instead of being controlled by whatever emotions arise from external conditions, you develop the ability to consciously generate emotional states that serve your goals and maintain your effectiveness. The fourth foundation is identity independence. Most people derive their self-worth and identity from external conditions, including job performance, others' opinions, financial status, or social relationships. Identity independence means developing a stable self-perception that remains intact regardless of external circumstances. Chapter 15. Creating a Legacy and Ethical Impact. The most fulfilling application of psychological mastery
is using your abilities to contribute to outcomes that are larger and more significant than your immediate personal interests. This involves applying your understanding of human behavior to solve meaningful problems, create value for many people, and generate change that leaves a lasting impact. Legacy creation represents the most satisfying expression of psychological mastery because it aligns your impact abilities with meaningful purposes that serve something greater than yourself. When you use your understanding of human psychology to help others achieve their goals, solve important problems, or create positive change in the world, you experience the deep fulfillment that comes from using your abilities in service of something beyond yourself. The full psychological mastery framework transforms you from someone who is subject to human behavior dynamics into someone who consciously works with these dynamics to create positive outcomes for yourself and others. You shift from reactive to strategic, from being influenced to being influential, and from being confused by human behavior to understanding and navigating it. This mastery gives you confidence in social and professional situations because you understand what is happening beneath the surface of interactions. It gives you influence because you know how to communicate and behave in ways that naturally make others more receptive to your ideas and requests. Most importantly, psychological mastery gives you the freedom to choose your responses in any situation, rather than being controlled by unconscious reactions, defensive patterns, or social conditioning. You become the person you are capable of being when you are no longer limited by the psychological forces operating around you. This freedom and capability represent the ultimate goal of understanding human psychology, not just to achieve better external results, but to become the person you can be when you are no longer constrained by subconscious psychological patterns that no longer serve your highest interests and values.
Conclusion: your new beginning. At this moment, having finished listening to this audio, you possess an understanding that most people will never access. You see the hidden rules behind human behavior. You understand subconscious patterns, and you now have the tools to influence, guide, and inspire ethically. But real power begins now. If this knowledge remains only theoretical, it will be interesting but ineffective. True mastery comes when you systematically apply this understanding to your daily interactions, decisions, and relationships. Every day offers you the opportunity to see people in a new light. Someone who appears angry? You now see that their survival brain is triggered. An irrational decision? You now understand which emotional driver is at play. A resistant partner or colleague? You now know which psychological need is unmet. With this awareness, you have the ability to move through the world differently, more strategically, more empathetically, more effectively, and most importantly, more freely. Because real freedom comes when you can see the invisible forces that control you, and once you see them, you can never pretend you don't. Welcome to your new beginning. Your journey to mastering the psychology of human behavior starts now.